mother-in-law systematically poisoned me with toxic roots for 3 weeks to kill me and steal the deed to my house. And my husband watched me drink it every single night. I am currently recording this from a hospital bed, shaking from the toxins still in my blood, trying to understand how a visit from family turned into an attempted murder investigation. I thought I was safe in the home I bought with my own hard-earned money. I thought Kenji was my partner, but while I was at work, they were plotting to erase me. They called me selfish for protecting my assets, yet they were the ones willing to trade my life to pay off a gambling debt. The betrayal burns worse than the poison ever did. I watched the man I loved choose his mother's greed over my safety. He held my hand while I writhed in pain on the floor and told me I was just being dramatic. Now, the police have arrested them, and my house is an empty crime scene. I have the power to send my husband to prison for conspiracy, but I feel like I am the one serving a life sentence of trauma. How do you ever close your eyes to sleep again when the person beside you wanted you dead? I feel so broken and alone. Please tell me, should I show mercy to the man I married, or do I destroy him like he tried to destroy me? My name is Gemma Patel. I am 32 years old, a senior data analyst for a prominent Silicon Valley financial technology firm. And I am currently standing in the center of a kitchen that costs more than my father's entire college education. I live in Oak Creek, one of those aggressively manicured gated communities in Northern California, where the Homeowners Association fines you $50 if your garbage cans are visible from the street after 6 in the evening. On paper, I am the picture of the modern American dream. I have the high 6-figure career, the sprawling mid-century modern home, and Kenji, my husband of 3 years. Kenji Tanaka is 34, handsome in a soft, non-threatening way, and works as a freelance graphic designer. To the world and to his family, we are partners, equals. We share a life, a bed, and a future. But there is a document locked in the bottom drawer of my filing cabinet, buried under tax returns from 2018, that says otherwise. The deed to this house has one name on it, mine. I bought this property 6 months before the wedding, using an inheritance from my grandmother and every cent I had aggressively invested since I was 22. Kenji thinks we are paying a mortgage. He thinks the large sum I transfer into our joint account every month goes to the bank. The truth is, the house is fully paid off. That money goes into a separate high-yield savings account that I call my Freedom Fund. Call me cynical, call me damaged, but I am the daughter of a mother who was left with nothing but credit card debt and a drinking problem after my father walked out on her 45th birthday. I love Kenji. I really do. He is kind, he makes me laugh, and he looks at me with a warmth that melts the ice I keep around my heart. But I trust numbers more than I trust people. Numbers do not lie. Numbers do not wake up one day, decide they have fallen out of love, and leave you homeless. This house is my fortress, and nobody, not even my husband, holds the keys to the gate. Gemma, please. You have to promise me. Kenji's voice snapped me out of my thoughts. He was standing over the kitchen island, frantically arranging sashimi on a ceramic platter with the precision of a heart surgeon. The air smelled of dashi, soy sauce, and anxiety. Promise you what? I asked, leaning against the quartz countertop. I watched his hands shake slightly as he placed a slice of tuna next to a slice of salmon. Tell her you made this, Kenji said, not meeting my eyes. Just this once. It will make her happy. You know how she is about Sao Yu Jing Hao Ling. Tuhash is greater than traditional duties. I felt a muscle in my jaw tighten. Kenji, your mother knows I work 60 hours a week. She knows I cannot boil an egg without setting off the smoke alarm. Why are we starting this visit with a lie? Because it is not just a lie, he pleaded. Finally looking up, his eyes were wide, desperate. It is about respect. It is about showing her that you care for me in the way she understands. Please, Gemma, for me? I looked at the feast spread out before us. Tempura, miso soup made from scratch, pickled vegetables. He had been fermenting for 3 days. It was a masterpiece, and he wanted me to take credit for it, just to soothe the ego of a woman I had only met twice at our wedding. Fine, I silde, regretting the word the moment it left my lips. I cooked it. I am the perfect little housewife. Are you happy? Thank you, he exhaled, rushing over to kiss my cheek. His lips felt cold. She will be here any minute. The doorbell did not just ring. It announced Judgment Day. I smoothed down my dress. It was navy blue, modest, expensive, and completely devoid of personality. Exactly how I thought Mrs. Tanaka would like it. I took a deep breath, putting on the mask I wore for board meetings and difficult stakeholders. When Kenji opened the double oak doors, the evening air drifted in, carrying the scent of rain. Mrs. Tanaka stood on the porch. She was a small woman, barely 5 feet tall, shrinking into a beige trench coat that looked 2 sizes too big for her frail frame. She held a small, battered suitcase with both hands in front of her, like a shield, but her eyes were not frail. They were sharp, dark beads that darted around the foyer. Missing nothing, Mama, Kenji said, his voice pitching up an octave. Welcome home. Mrs. Tanaka did not smile. She stepped inside, her gaze bypassing her son and landing squarely on the abstract painting hanging on the far wall. So much glass, she whispered, her voice like dry leaves scraping together. She shook her head slightly. Very so Yujing Haoling. 2 hash is greater than cold. Like a hospital, I stepped forward, extending my hand, forcing a bright, welcoming smile. Welcome, Mrs. Tanaka. It is so good to have you here. Did you have a good flight? She stopped. She looked at my outstretched hand for a long, agonizing second. There was a flicker of something indistinguishable in her expression. Was it disgust, pity, or just plain boredom? She did not shake my hand. Instead, she stepped right past me, closing the distance to Kenji. She reached up, her hand trembling slightly, and brushed a speck of invisible dust off his shoulder. It was a possessive, intimate gesture that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. You look thin, Kenji, she said softly, ignoring my existence entirely. Is she feeding you? The question hung in the air, heavy and toxic. Of course. Mama. Kenji laughed nervously, guiding her toward the living room. Gemma made a huge dinner. You will love it. I stood alone in the foyer, my hands still half extended, staring at their backs. The house, my house. I suddenly felt very large and very empty. I watched as she walked across the hardwood floors I'd paid for, her shoes leaving faint, muddy prints on the polished wood. That was the moment. The first seed of deception had been planted, fertilized by Kenji's cowardice and my own silence. I should have spoken up. I should have corrected her, but I simply lowered my hand, clenched my fist, and followed them into the dining room. I told myself it was just for a few days. I told myself I could handle one old woman. I had no idea that I had just let a parasite into my home. The sound of chopsticks clicking against porcelain was the only thing filling the dining room. It was a rhythmic, sharp noise, like a metronome counting down to an explosion. Outside, the Northern California rain had turned into a deluge, battering the floor-to-ceiling windows with a violence that matched the knot twisting in my stomach. Mrs. Tanaka ate with a terrifying grace. She picked up a piece of the amberjack sashimi, inspected it under the chandelier light, and placed it on her tongue. She closed her eyes. Kenji sat across from her, his posture rigid, his knuckles white as he gripped his napkin. He looked like a man on trial for his life, waiting for the verdict. She swallowed. Then, slowly, the corners of her mouth lifted into a smile that did not reach her eyes. "Exquisite," she said, her voice soft. She turned her gaze to me. "I did not know you possessed such Saiyutinghaling, 2 hashes greater than domestic talents. Gemma, Kenji told me you were a career woman. I assumed that meant you relied on microwaves and takeout menus." I felt Kenji kick my shin gently under the table. It was the signal. I enjoy cooking. I lead. The words tasting like ash in my mouth. I took a long sip of my Pinot Noir, letting the alcohol settle my nerves. "I wanted to make something special to welcome you. The dashi is perfect," she continued, ignoring my attempt at warmth. "It takes patience to make dashi this clear. Patience is a virtue I did not think your generation possessed." She was baiting me. I knew it, but the wine was doing its job, loosening the tight coil of anxiety in my chest. I felt a sudden, stupid urge to prove myself. If she wanted a traditional daughter-in-law, I could play the part. I could beat her at her own game. "Thank you," I said, leaning forward slightly. "It is all about the preparation. You have to be careful not to bruise the fish fibers." I gestured vaguely with my hand, mimicking a motion I had seen Kenji do 1,000 times. That is why the single-stroke pull with the Yanagiba knife is so important. You cannot saw at the meat. You have to let the blade's weight do the work. The room went dead silent. The rain hammered against the glass. Kenji froze, his glass halfway to his mouth. Mrs. Tanaka slowly placed her chopsticks down on the rest. She turned her head mechanically to look at me, her eyes narrowing into 2 dark slits. "The Yanagiba," she repeated. Her voice was barely a whisper. My stomach dropped. I realized my mistake instantly. A casual home cook might know about sushi, but referencing the specific knife and the blade weight technique, that was technical. That was chef speak. That was Kenji. I mean, Saiyutinghaling, too. I stammered, looking at Kenji for help. He was staring at his plate, refusing to make eye contact. "My son has that knife," Mrs. Tanaka said, her voice devoid of emotion. "He spent $500 on it 3 years ago. He keeps it in a velvet case. He does not let anyone touch it." She looked at Kenji, then back at me. "You are lying, Mama. Please," Kenji started, his voice cracking. "Silence," she hissed, slapping her hand on the table. The silverware jumped. "She lies to my face. In my son's house. She takes credit for your labor." She stood up, her small frame suddenly looming large in the dim light. She pointed a trembling finger at me. "You are a fraud, a useless decoration. You cannot cook. You probably cannot clean. You just sit here in your expensive clothes while my son slaves away like a servant." "Excuse me?" I said, the shock finally giving way to indignation. "I work extremely hard to support this family." "Support?" She laughed. A dry, harsh sound. "You bring home money. Any stranger can bring home money. A wife brings a home. A wife brings honor. She leaned over the table, her face inches from the centerpiece. You are a disgrace. Gemma Patel, you are not worthy of the Tanaka name. Okay, that is enough, I said, standing up. My legs felt shaky. You are tired. We should stop this. I will not sleep under the same roof as a liar. She spat. She turned to Kenji. Get her out. I blinked. What? Get her out of this house. Mrs. Tanaka commanded, looking at her son. She has disrespected me. She has disrespected you. If you are a man, Kenji, you will remove this woman from my sight. I looked at Kenji. I waited for him to laugh. I waited for him to tell his mother that she was being absurd, that this was my house, that my name was on the mortgage, on the insurance, on the very chair she was standing next to. But Kenji did not laugh. He looked terrified. He looked at his mother, then at me, his eyes pleading for a solution that did not involve him growing a spine. Mama, he whispered, I cannot kick her out. This is Saoyutsing Haling. 2 hash is greater than we live here together. Then I will leave. Mrs. Tanaka shrieked. She grabbed her purse from the floor. I will not stay here and be insulted by this charlatan. I would rather sleep on the street. She marched toward the front door. It was a bluff. It had to be a bluff. It was pouring rain outside, pitch black, and 40 degrees. Mama? Wait. Kenji scrambled after her. I stood in the dining room, listening to the chaos in the foyer. I heard the front door open, the roar of the wind, and Mrs. Tanaka's voice wailing about ungrateful children. I am going to the motel, she screamed over the wind. Do not follow me. Kenji, stay with your fake wife. The door slammed shut. Silence rushed back into the house, heavy and suffocating. I walked into the foyer. Kenji was standing there, staring at the closed door, his shoulders slumped. He looked like a child who had lost his balloon. She is gone, he murmured. In this weather, Gemma, how could you? How could I asked, my voice calm, dangerously calm. She called me a useless decoration in my own dining room. Kenji, and you said nothing. She is old. She is traditional. Kenji turned to me, his face red. Why did you have to mention the knife? Why could you not just play along for 1 hour? I am going to bed, I said. I was too exhausted to argue. I was too exhausted to remind him that he was the one who asked me to lie in the first place. I walked up the stairs, leaving him alone in the foyer. My heart was pounding, not from fear, but from a strange, cold realization. My husband had just watched his mother try to evict me from a property I owned, and his only reaction was to blame me for her temper tantrum. I went into the master bedroom and locked the door. I needed space. I needed to look at my bank accounts, to see the numbers, to remind myself that I was safe, that I had control. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was a text message from an unknown number. I knew who it was immediately. I opened it. There was no greeting, no signature, just a photo of a page from a Bible, with 2 verses highlighted in angry red marker. Proverbs 21, verse 9. Better to live on a corner of the roof than share a house with a quarrelsome wife. Proverbs 21, verse 19. Better to live in a desert than with a quarrelsome and nagging wife. I stared at the screen. She was at a motel, probably soaking wet, and her priority was to find a Bible, highlight it, take a picture, and send it to me. I looked around my beautiful, quiet bedroom. For the first time since I signed the deed, the walls did not feel like a fortress. They felt like the beginning of a cage. The phone rang at 13 minutes past 2 in the morning. It is a specific kind of sound that cuts through the deep, velvety silence of a suburban night. It is not just a noise. It is an alarm bell for catastrophe. I was awake before the second ring, my heart slamming against my ribcage like a trapped bird. Beside me, Kenji groaned, fumbling in the dark for his phone on the nightstand. The screen lit up the room with a harsh, blue glare, illuminating the terror already etched onto his face. He answered it. He listened for 3 seconds. Then, he made a sound I had never heard a grown man make. It was a strangled, high-pitched whimper, like a dog that had been kicked. "Mama," he choked out. He scrambled out of bed, tangling his feet in the duvet, tripping, knocking over a glass of water. The crash shattered the silence, but he did not even flinch. He was already pulling on his jeans, hopping on one leg, tears streaming down his face. "She is dying. Gemma," he screamed at me, his voice raw. "She is at the emergency room. Her heart stopped. I mean, it hurts. Her heart hurts. Oh God. I killed her. We killed her." The drive to the hospital was a blur of windshield wipers and red traffic lights that we ignored. I drove. Kenji was useless, curled into a ball in the passenger seat, rocking back and forth, muttering apologies to a woman who was not there. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. My mind was a cold, analytical machine. I was calculating insurance copays, urgent care versus emergency room statistics, and the likelihood of a myocardial infarction in a woman who had enough energy to scream at me 3 hours ago. The emergency room smelled of antiseptic and stale coffee and human misery. We found her in curtain number 4. Mrs. Tanaka looked tiny in the hospital bed. The wires attached to her chest seemed to be the only things tethering her to the mattress. Her skin was ashen, her eyes closed. The monitor beside her beeped a steady, rhythmic cadence. Beep, beep, beep. Kenji threw himself at the bedside, grabbing her limp hand. "Mama, I am here. I am so sorry." A doctor stepped through the curtain. He looked exhausted, holding a clipboard against his chest. I stepped forward, putting on my professional armor. I needed facts, not theater. "What is the diagnosis?" "Doctor?" I asked. The doctor looked at me, then at Kenji sobbing over his mother. "He said, it appears to be a severe angina attack induced by acute stress. We have run the enzymes. It was not a heart attack. Technically speaking, her heart is physically sound, but her blood pressure spiked to dangerous levels. She was hyperventilating when the ambulance brought her in from the motel." Kenji lifted his head, his eyes red and swollen. "Stress?" The doctor nodded. She kept saying she had been thrown out, that she had no home. Emotional trauma can manifest physically, especially in older patients. She needs absolute rest. No conflicts, no travel. Her heart is fragile right now. Not structurally, but functionally. If she gets agitated again, the next one could be the real thing. He might as well have handed Mrs. Tanaka a loaded gun. I looked at the woman in the bed. Her eyes fluttered open. She looked at Kenji, tears pooling in her lashes. "I will go back to the motel," she whispered, her voice a fragile rasp. "I do not want to be a burden. I will just Sao Yu Ting Hao Ling. 2 hash is greater than wait there until I am strong enough to fly back to Japan. Or until I die. It does not matter." "No," Kenji cried out, squeezing her hand. You are not going back to that motel. You are coming home with us. I stiffened. The air in the small cubicle suddenly felt very thin. I looked at Mrs. Tanaka for a split second, just a microsecond. Her eyes flicked to me. There was no pain in them. There was no confusion. There was only a cold, hard victory. Then, she squeezed her eyes shut and let out a long, shuddering sigh. Gemma? Kenji turned to me. His face was a mask of desperation. Please, just until she stabilizes. Just for a week. I cannot leave her alone. The doctor said no stress. Please. I looked at the monitor. Beep, beep, beep. I looked at my husband, a man who was currently being played like a cheap violin. And I looked at the woman who wanted to destroy my marriage. If I said no, I was the monster who turned away a sick old woman. I would be the cause of her next episode. I would be the villain in Kenji's life story, forever. Fine, I said. My voice sounded hollow. 1 week, until the doctor clears her to travel. The ride home was silent. We settled her into the guest room on the first floor. Kenji fluffed her pillows, brought her water, and adjusted the thermostat 3 times until she was satisfied. I stood in the doorway, watching. I felt like a stranger in my own house. I felt like a ghost haunting a property I held the deed to. The next 3 days were a masterclass in psychological warfare. Mrs. Tanaka was no longer the aggressive critic who had screamed at me over sushi. That woman had vanished. In her place was a saintly, fragile martyr. She shuffled around the house in soft slippers that made a whispering sound on the hardwood. She spoke in hushed tones. She flinched whenever I walked into a room, as if she expected me to strike her. And then, the changes started. It began on Tuesday. I came home from work late, exhausted after a 10-hour day of analyzing failing market trends. I walked into the living room and stopped dead. The room was different. It was subtle at first. The large, gray sectional sofa had been pushed 3 feet to the left. The coffee table was rotated. The expensive, abstract sculpture I had bought in Santa Fe was missing from the mantel and replaced by a small, wooden shrine with incense sticks. I dropped my bag. Kenji? I called out. He came out of the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel. He looked tired but relieved. Hey, honey, Mama is resting. Why is my furniture moved? I asked, pointing at the sofa. Oh. Kenji rubbed the back of his neck. Mama said the energy flow was blocked. The chi was hitting the door wrong. She said it was bad luck for your career. She spent all afternoon pushing it. I told her not to, but she insisted she wanted to help. She wanted to contribute since she cannot pay rent. My career? I laughed. A sharp, humorless sound. My career pays for the roof over her head. My career is doing just fine without feng shui. Gemma, keep your voice down. Kenji, he said, glancing toward the guest room. She is trying to be nice. She wants us to be prosperous. Why do you have to be so hostile? Hostile? I walked over to the mantel. Where is my sculpture? In the garage. Kenji said. She said the sharp edges were cutting our marriage bond. I closed my eyes. I counted to 10 in 3 different languages. It was not about the furniture. It was about dominance. It was about pissing on a fire hydrant to mark territory. She was rewriting the narrative of my home, erasing my taste, my choices, my identity, and replacing them with her own. And she was doing it under the guise of helping. I went upstairs to change, needing to escape the incense-scented air of the ground floor. I walked into my home office. This was my sanctuary. This was the one room Kenji knew never to enter without knocking. It was where I kept the servers, the financial records, the dual monitor setup that was the nerve center of my professional life. I stopped in the doorway. The air in the room felt disturbed. I walked to my desk, my chair, an ergonomic mesh model that I kept adjusted to a specific height, was lowered. I sat in it, and my knees hit the desk. Someone had sat here. I looked at the desk surface. My pens were in the cup, but they were arranged by color. I never arranged them by color. I looked at the filing cabinet. It was locked, just as I had left it, but there was a faint scratch near the keyhole, a tiny silver scar on the black metal that had not been there yesterday. My heart began to hammer again, faster than it had during the 2 o'clock phone call. She had been in here. She had been sitting in my chair, touching my things, perhaps trying to open the cabinet where the house deed lay hidden. I felt a wave of nausea. This was not just a visit. This was an infiltration. I was living with a spy. I pulled out my smartphone. My hands were shaking, but my mind was crystal clear. I opened the application store. I searched for hidden voice recorder and background recording. I downloaded a high-rated application that looked like a simple calculator on the screen, but recorded audio in the background, even when the phone was locked. I set the application to high sensitivity. I am not paranoid, I whispered to myself in the empty office. I looked at the scratch on the filing cabinet again. It glinted in the afternoon sun. A small, jagged warning. I am not paranoid. I repeated. I am under attack. Downstairs, I heard the soft shuffle of slippers and the clinking of a teapot. It sounded like a horror movie soundtrack. I sat in my lowered chair, staring at the black screen of my computer, and I realized that the woman downstairs did not want to fix her relationship with me. She wanted to erase me. She wanted to take the keys, the house, the sun, and leave me with nothing but the memory of a life I used to own. I unlocked the bottom drawer of my desk, took out a roll of clear Scotch tape, and placed a tiny, invisible piece across the seal of the filing cabinet. An old trick, a simple trap. If she came back, I would know. I stood up, adjusted my blazer, and prepared to go downstairs for dinner. I would eat her food. I would smile at her stories. I would play the part of the dutiful wife, but beneath the table, my phone would be recording. Every word, every whisper, every lie. The smell hit me the moment I opened the front door. It was not a bad smell. In fact, under any other circumstances, it would have been delicious. It was an earthy, pungent aroma of braised roots and simmering broth, heavy with star anise and something else I could not quite identify. Something musky and bitter, like wet bark. It clung to the curtains. It settled into the fibers of the expensive wool rug in the hallway. It felt less like a dinner preparation and more like an atmospheric change. A thick fog that had rolled in to obscure the sharp, clean lines of my life. I walked into the kitchen. Mrs. Tanaka was standing at the stove. She was wearing one of my aprons, the linen one I had bought in Napa Valley, tied tightly around her small waist. She did not look up when I entered. She was stirring a large pot with a rhythmic, hypnotic motion. Clink, swirl, clink, swirl. I wanted to make myself useful, she said, her voice soft, addressing the pot rather than me. I cannot pay rent, Gemma. I know you value money above all else. So, I will pay with labor. I will nourish my son. I tightened my grip on my laptop bag. That subtle dig, you value money above all else, was delivered with the precision of a surgeon. You do not have to do that, I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. You are recovering. You should be resting. Work is prayer, she replied. She finally turned to look at me. Her face was a mask of beatific calm, but her eyes were hard. Sit. Eat. Kenji was already seated. He looked happier than I had seen him in months. His face was flushed, his tie loosened. He was devouring a bowl of the dark, steaming stew. It is amazing, Gemma, he said, his mouth full. It tastes just like what she used to make when I was a kid. You have to try it. I sat down. A bowl was placed before me. The liquid was dark. Opake. Floating in it were chunks of meat and strange, knobbly vegetables that looked like twisted fingers. I picked up my spoon. I told myself I was being ridiculous. I told myself it was just soup. I took a sip. It was bitter, an intense, medicinal bitterness that coated the back of my throat. I swallowed hard, forcing a smile. It is. 夏日静好灵. 2 hash is greater than very unique. I choked out. It is good for the blood. Mrs. Tanaka said, watching me closely. She was not eating. She was just watching. It cleans out the impurities. I managed to eat half the bowl before the itching started. It began on the back of my neck, a prickling heat like a sunburn. Then it crawled down my arms. I rubbed my wrist under the table, trying to be discreet. The skin felt hot to the touch. By the time Kenji was clearing the plates, my chest felt tight, and a thick, cotton wool fog was descending over my brain. I stood up to help clear the table, but the room tilted dangerously to the left. I grabbed the edge of the island to steady myself. Whoa, Kenji laughed, reaching out to steady me. A little too much wine? You did not even finish 1 glass. I do not feel well, I mumbled. My tongue felt thick, clumsy in my mouth. My skin is burning. Mrs. Tanaka stepped forward. She reached out and touched my forehead with a hand that felt like dry parchment. No fever, she declared. She looked at Kenji. She is just tired. Modern women work too hard. Their bodies forget how to rest. It is not tiredness, I snapped, pulling away from her touch. I pulled up the sleeve of my blouse. Look, my forearm was covered in angry red welts. They were rising against the skin, forming a map of irritation that pulsed with every heartbeat. Kenji squinted at my arm. It looks like a heat rash. Honey, or maybe stress hives? You have been so tense lately. Stress? I stared at him. I am breaking out in hives. Kenji, this happened right after I ate. Are you saying my mother poisoned you? Kenji asked. His voice dropped, losing all its warmth. I looked at Mrs. Tanaka. She was wiping the counter, her movements slow and deliberate. She did not look defended. She looked disappointed. I am not saying that, I said, fighting the brain fog. I am saying I might be allergic to something in the stew. What was in it? Just vegetables. Mrs. Tanaka said quietly, love and vegetables. Perhaps you are allergic to a mother's love. The gaslighting was so blatant, so heavy-handed, that I almost laughed. But I did not have the energy. The exhaustion was pulling me down like a lead weight. I stumbled upstairs, leaving them in the kitchen. As I climbed, I heard their low voices. They sounded conspiratorial. They sounded like a unit. I took 2 antihistamines and passed out on top of the covers. The next morning, the hives had faded to pink shadows, but the brain fog remained. It felt like I was thinking through molasses. I sat at my desk at work, staring at a spreadsheet of quarterly projections. The numbers, usually my friends, swam before my eyes. I missed a critical variance in the third column. I sent the report to my boss with the error. 2 hours later, I got a reply. Gemma, this is unlike you. Are you okay? I deleted the email. I could not explain that I was being slowly dismantled by a 60-year-old woman and a bowl of soup. When I drove home that evening, the sun was setting, casting long, bruised shadows across the manicured lawns of Oak Creek. I pulled up to the mailbox cluster at the entrance of our cul-de-sac. I needed a moment before facing the house. As I was pulling a stack of bills from my slot, a shadow fell over me. Well, if it is not the busy bee, I turned. It was Betty Miller, the president of the Homeowners Association. Betty was a woman who weaponized passive aggression and wielded the neighborhood bylaws like a holy scripture. Usually, we exchanged polite, fake smiles. Today, her face was pinched tight. Hello, Betty, I said, shutting my mailbox. I saw your mother-in-law today, Betty said. She crossed her arms over her floral tracksuit. She was walking to the bus stop. In the rain, Mrs. Tanaka does not take the bus, I said, confused. And it is not raining. She looked so frail. Betty continued, ignoring me. We had a long talk. She is a lovely woman, very spiritual. That is nice, I said, edging toward my car. She told me about the sleeping arrangements, Betty said. Her voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper, but her eyes were accusing. You know, Gemma, I understand cultural differences, but making an elderly woman with a heart condition sleep on a blow-up mattress in the garage? That is, 萧敬好令, 2 hashes greater than well. In this community, we treat our elders with dignity. My jaw dropped. Excuse me? She is in the guest room, I said, my voice rising. She has a queen-size bed with Egyptian cotton sheets. Betty raised an eyebrow. She held up a hand. You do not have to explain yourself to me. It is your house. Although, she did mention that, technically, the house belongs to you, so you make the rules. She seemed very accepting of her place, very humble. I felt the blood drain from my face. Mrs. Tanaka had not only lied, she had weaponized the truth. She had taken the fact of my homeownership, something I kept private, and twisted it to paint me as a tyrant. Have a nice evening. Gemma, Betty said. She turned and walked away, her floral tracksuit disappearing into the twilight. I stood by my car, clutching the mail. My skin started to itch again, not from the soup this time, but from the realization of how deep the rot had spread. She was not just taking over my kitchen. She was dismantling my reputation. She was isolating me. I looked down the street toward my house. The lights were on. It looked warm, inviting, perfect. But from where I stood, it looked like the mouth of a beast waiting to swallow me whole. I scratched my arm, hard, until I felt the sting of a fingernail breaking skin. I was not crazy. I was not ungrateful. I was the prey, and the hunt was just beginning. I came home at 2 in the afternoon because the headache was blinding. It felt like an ice pick was being driven into my right temple, a rhythmic, pulsing agony that made looking at computer screens impossible. I told my boss it was a migraine. In reality, it felt like my body was rejecting its own skin. The house was silent when I unlocked the front door. The blinds were drawn, casting the living room in a murky, sepia gloom. I dropped my keys in the bowl, the metal clatter echoing too loudly in the stillness. I intended to go straight to the master bedroom, swallow 3 ibuprofen, and sleep until the world stopped spinning. But as I passed the hallway leading to my office, I stopped. A thin beam of light was slicing across the hallway floor. My office door was supposed to be shut. It was supposed to be locked. I had locked it this morning. I remembered the click. I remembered checking the handle. I took off my heels so I could walk silently. My heart began to hammer against my ribs, overriding the pain in my head. I crept down the hall, pushing the door open with the tips of my fingers. The scene before me was so brazen, so violating, that for a moment, my brain refused to process it. Mrs. Tanaka was sitting at my desk. She had not just entered the room, she had ransacked it. My meticulously organized files were scattered across the floor like fallen leaves. Tax returns, bank statements, investment portfolios. She had forced the lock of the filing cabinet. A bent paperclip and a small screwdriver from Kenji's tool set sat on the blotter, but it was what she was holding that made the air leave my lungs. In her left hand, she held the grant deed to the property. In her right hand, she held the prenuptial agreement I had drafted years ago but never asked Kenji to sign, a document I kept as a failsafe, a reminder of my own cynicism. "What are you doing?" My voice was a whisper, but it sounded like a gunshot in the quiet room. Mrs. Tanaka did not jump. She did not look guilty. She slowly swiveled my chair around to face me. Her expression was one of profound, terrifying disappointment. "I was looking for a stamp," she said, calm, waving the deed in the air. "I wanted to mail a letter to my sister, but instead, I found this." "Get out of my chair," I said, my voice shaking. "You broke into my office. You picked the lock." She slammed the papers down on the desk. The sound made me flinch. "You are a fraud," she hissed. Standing up, she was small, but in that moment, she seemed to fill the room with a dark, suffocating energy. I suspected it. I knew a woman like you could not be a true partner. But this is evil. Evil? I stepped forward, fury finally burning through the shock. I bought this house with my own money. I saved for 10 years. That is my name on the paper. Mine. And where is Kenji's name? She screamed, pointing a trembling finger at the document. "Where is my son's name? He is your husband. He is the head of this household, but you treat him like a guest." "No, not a guest," she sneered, her lip curling in disgust. "You treat him like a gigolo, a kept man. You let him play house while you hold the leash." "I am protecting myself," I yelled back, "and looking at you right now, breaking into my private files. I was right to do it." "Protecting yourself from what? From love? From family?" She picked up the prenuptial draft. "You never planned to stay married. You planned to use him, to have a pretty face to cook for you and warm your bed while you hoard your gold like a dragon." "What is going on?" Kenji stood in the doorway. He was home early too. He held a grocery bag in one hand, his eyes wide with confusion. He looked from his mother's red face to the papers scattered on the floor. "Kenji," Mrs. Tanaka wailed, her voice instantly shifting from rage to heartbreak. She slumped back into the chair, covering her face with her hands. "Oh, my poor boy, my poor, foolish boy." "Gemma." Kenji stepped into the room. "Why is Mom crying? Why is the filing cabinet open?" She broke in. "Kenji." I pointed at her. She picked the lock. She went through our financial records. "She is lying to you." Mrs. Tanaka looked up, tears streaming down her face. She held up the deed. Look at this. Kenji, look. Who owns this house? Kenji frowned. He walked over and took the paper. He read it. I watched his eyes scan the lines. I saw the moment the realization hit him. His shoulders stiffened. Sole and separate property. He read aloud. He looked up at me. Gemma, I thought, Saoyu Xinghao Ling. 2 hashes greater than I thought we were paying the mortgage together. You said the transfer every month was for the mortgage. It goes into a savings account. I said, my voice hard. The house is paid off. I paid it off before we met. So, I have been paying rent? Kenji asked. His voice was quiet, hurt. For 3 years, I have been paying rent to my own wife. It is savings. Kenji, it is our money for the future. I tried to reach for his arm, but he pulled away. You lied to me, he whispered. You let me believe this was our home, but it is just your house. I am just a tenant. She thinks you are a fool. Mrs. Tanaka interjected, standing up to wrap her arms around Kenji's waist. She buried her face in his chest, looking at me over his shoulder. She does not trust you. She has a secret escape plan. Look at the other paper. She has a contract to divorce you ready to go. That is a draft from 5 years ago. I screamed. I never used it, but you kept it. Kenji said. He looked at me with a stranger's eyes. You kept it. Gemma, just in case. Kenji. She broke into the office. She is manipulating you. I pleaded. Can you not see what she is doing? She is trying to divide us. You divided us the day you signed this deed and did not tell me. Kenji said coldly. He crumpled the paper in his hand. My mother was just trying to find a stamp. She stumbled onto your lies. I stared at him. The absurdity of it was overwhelming. He was choosing to believe that she accidentally picked a lock to find a stamp. He was choosing his wounded ego over the obvious reality of her malice. Mrs. Tanaka tightened her grip on him, over his shoulder. Her tear-stained face shifted. The corners of her mouth twitched upward. It was a micro-expression, lasting less than a second. But I saw it. It was a smirk. She had won. She had exposed the one secret I had kept to protect myself, and she had turned it into a weapon to sever the bond between Kenji and me. I need some air, Kenji muttered. He gently disentangled himself from his mother. I need to think. Go, my son. Mrs. Tanaka cooed. Go find peace. I will clean up this mess your wife made. Kenji walked out of the room without looking at me. I stood frozen. Mrs. Tanaka smoothed down her apron. The tears were gone instantly. She began gathering the papers, stacking them neatly on the desk. You should have added his name, she whispered, not looking at me. Now, you will pay the price of admission. I realized then that the headache was gone. It had been replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. The marriage I thought I had was dead. The man I thought I loved was a child. And the woman standing at my desk was not a guest. She was the new owner. The destruction of my sanctuary did not happen with a bang, but with the screech of rusted brake pads and the thumping bass of a car stereo that rattled the double-pane windows of my living room. It was 3 days after the confrontation in my office. 3 days of Kenji sleeping on the sofa. 3 days of Mrs. Tanaka walking through the hallways like a silent wraith, her eyes following me with a mixture of pity and malice. I had retreated into myself, working late, eating protein bars in my car, and avoiding common areas. But the sound outside shattered my fragile ceasefire. I pulled back the sheer curtain of the master bedroom window. A battered, charcoal gray sedan was idling in my driveway. It was missing a hubcap, and the rear bumper was held on by duct tape. But the driver did not stop at the driveway. He jumped the curb. I watched in horror as the heavy tires tore through the pristine Kentucky bluegrass. I paid a landscaping crew $400 a month to maintain. The car came to a halt halfway across the lawn, oil dripping onto the green blades. The driver's door swung open, and Hiro Tanaka stepped out. Kenji's younger brother was 30 years old, but he moved with the loose, chaotic energy of a teenager who had never been told no. He wore a stained oversized jersey and baggy cargo shorts that hung low on his hips. He tossed a cigarette butt onto my driveway, ground it out with his sneaker, and then popped the trunk. He began unloading, not just a suitcase. He pulled out trash bags filled with clothes, a guitar case covered in stickers, and a flat-screen television with a cracked corner. This was not a visit. This was a relocation. I ran downstairs, my heart thudding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I reached the foyer just as the front door swung open. Mrs. Tanaka was already there, her arms wide open, her face glowing with a joy I had never seen her direct at anyone else. "Hiro," she cried out, embracing the man who smelled of stale tobacco and cheap body spray. "My baby, you are finally safe." "Hey, Mama," Hiro grinned, hugging her back. He looked over her shoulder and saw me. His grin widened, revealing a slightly chipped front tooth. "Hey, Gemma, nice place. A little stiff, but we can fix that." "What is going on?" I asked, my voice trembling with suppressed rage. "Why is there a car parked on my lawn? The Homeowners Association will fine us $500 if it is not moved in 10 minutes. "Relax, princess," Hiro laughed, dropping a heavy trash bag onto the hardwood floor with a wet thud. "I just drove 6 hours. Let a man breathe." "Kenji," I yelled. Kenji appeared from the kitchen. He looked pale, his eyes darting between me and his brother. "He is here," Kenji said softly. "Mama said he needed a place to crash, just for a little while. He is going through a hard time. His landlord was Xiao Jinghao Ling. 2# is greater than unreasonable." "Unreasonable?" I looked at Hiro. "Let me guess. He wanted rent money? You see?" Mrs. Tanaka stepped in front of Hiro, shielding him like a lioness protecting a cub. "Always about money. You have no heart. Gemma, your brother-in-law is in crisis. Family helps family. That is the rule. Not in my house." I said, "I did not agree to this." "It is not just your house," Hiro said. Stepping around his mother, he walked up to me, invading my personal space. He smelled of sweat and something sweet, like rotting fruit. "I heard about the deed. Gemma, Mama told me everything. You tricked my brother. You trapped him. We are having a family meeting," Mrs. Tanaka announced. Now, in the living room, it was not a request. It was a summons to a trial. 10 minutes later, I was sitting in the armchair in the corner of my own living room. Opposite me, on the long sofa, sat the Tanaka triumvirate. Mrs. Tanaka in the middle, holding a hand of each son. It was a grotesque tableau of unity. "Here is the situation," Mrs. Tanaka began, her voice calm and authoritative. "Hiro has debts. Unfair debts caused by bad luck and wicked people. He needs a place to heal. He will stay in the game room." "The game room is my office," I said. "Not anymore," she countered. You do not need an office to count your secret money. Hero needs space. Saoyuting Haling, due cancelletto è maggiore di no. I said, and Mrs. Tanaka continued, raising her voice over mine. We need to resolve the issue of ownership. Kenji is the man of this house. He cannot be a tenant. It destroys his spirit. It destroys his honor. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded document. She slid it across the coffee table toward me. It was a quitclaim deed. I recognized the form. It would transfer 50% of the property interest to Kenji Tanaka. Sign it, she said. I looked at the paper. Then I looked at Kenji. He was staring at his knees, his jaw tight. Kenji, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Are you really doing this? You are letting them extort me? Kenji looked up. His eyes were wet. It is not extortion. Gemma, it is fairness. If we are married, we share. If you love me, you should not need a piece of paper to protect you from me. Unless, Saoyuting Haling, 2 hash is greater than unless you do not love me. That is his mother talking. I said, that is not you. Sign the paper, Gemma, Hiro said, leaning back and putting his dirty sneakers on the coffee table. Prove you are not a witch. Prove you actually care about this family. And if I do not? I asked. Mrs. Tanaka smiled. It was a cold, reptilian smile. Then we know where we stand. And life in this house will become Saoyuting Haling. 2 hash is greater than very difficult for you. A wife who does not trust her husband is a cancer, and cancers must be treated aggressively. I stood up. My legs felt like jelly. I am not signing anything. And Hiro, move your car, or I am calling a tow truck. You would not dare, Hiro sneered. Try me, I said. I turned and walked out of the room. Behind me, I heard Mrs. Tanaka whisper something in Japanese. Then, loud, raucous laughter erupted from Hiro. I locked myself in the master bedroom. I pushed the heavy dresser in front of the door. I was trembling so hard I could barely hold my phone. I checked the security cameras on my application. Hiro was not moving his car. He was taking a nap in the driver's seat. I sat on the edge of the bed. I felt sick, not just emotionally sick, physically sick. The itching was back. It started on my scalp, a burning sensation that felt like ants crawling through my hair. Then it moved to my neck. I ran to the bathroom mirror. My reflection horrified me. My eyes were puffy, the whites distinctively yellow. A rash was blooming across my chest, angry red splotches that looked like maps of new continents. My stomach churned, a deep, roiling nausea that made me double over. What was happening to me? I had not eaten their food. I had been careful. For the last 2 days, I had only eaten protein bars from a sealed box I kept in my car and bottled water I bought myself. I sat on the cold tile floor of the bathroom, scratching at my neck until I drew blood. Maybe it was the stress. The doctor had said stress could kill Mrs. Tanaka. Maybe it was killing me too. My body was reacting to the invasion, to the violation of my space. Or maybe it was something else. I thought about the smell in the house. That heavy, earthy scent of herbs and roots that Mrs. Tanaka was constantly boiling. She called it air purification. She said it was to clear the bad spirits I had brought into the home. I crawled back to the bedroom. The air in here smelled faint, but the scent was there. It was in the vents. It was in the fabric of the curtains. I lay on the bed, curling into a fetal position. Downstairs, I could hear the television blaring. Hiro was watching sports. I heard the clatter of pots and pans. Mrs. Tanaka was cooking again. Kenji. I whispered to the empty room, but Kenji was not there. He was downstairs, sitting on the sofa with them. He had made his choice. He had chosen the tribe over the partner. I closed my eyes, but sleep did not come. Only images of legal documents, rusted cars, and Mrs. Tanaka's smiling face danced in the dark. I was a prisoner in a $1 million jail cell, and as the nausea rolled over me again, a terrifying thought took root in my fogged brain. They did not just want the deed. They did not just want the money. They wanted me gone, and looking at the red welts spreading down my arms, I realized with a jolt of pure, icy terror that they were not waiting for me to leave voluntarily. They were speeding up the process. The air in the master bedroom was stale, recycled, and heavy with the scent of my own fear. I had been barricaded in the room for 6 hours, staring at the ceiling, listening to the muffled sounds of celebration downstairs, Hiro's jagged laughter, the clinking of bottles, Mrs. Tanaka's low, murmuring voice. They were feasting in my home while I lay upstairs, shivering under a duvet that cost $1,000, feeling like a rat trapped in a maze. I rolled over and grabbed my smartphone. My hands were trembling so violently that it took me 3 tries to unlock the screen. I needed proof. I knew, with the instinct of a wounded animal, that my illness was not natural. The doctors had called it stress. Kenji called it exhaustion. But stress does not taste like bitter earth. Stress does not make your tongue swell until it feels like a piece of dead meat in your mouth. I opened the application connected to the nanny cam I had hidden 3 days ago. It was a tiny, cube-shaped device, tucked discreetly behind a decorative jar of pasta on the kitchen counter. I had bought it on a whim, feeling paranoid. Now, it was my only window into the truth. I scrolled through the timeline. The footage was grainy, the colors washed out, but the images were clear enough. 6 in the evening. Mrs. Tanaka was at the stove. She was humming. She chopped onions. She stirred a pot. It looked innocent. I fast-forwarded. 6:30. Kenji entered the frame. He hugged his mother. She kissed his cheek. He left the room to set the table. I fast-forwarded again. 6:45. The kitchen was empty. Sao Jingha, Ling. 2 hash is greater than weight. Sao Jingha Ling. 2 hash is greater than I rewound. 6:42. Mrs. Tanaka was alone. She looked toward the hallway to ensure she was unobserved. Then, she reached into the deep pocket of her apron. She pulled out a small, dried object. It looked like a root, dark and gnarled, resembling a shriveled finger. She produced a small metal grater, not one from my drawers, but a small, handheld one she must have brought with her. She held the root over the teapot, specifically my blue ceramic teapot, the one I used for my evening chamomile. I watched, frozen in horror, as she grated the root. Dust fell into the steeping water, a fine, gray powder. She did it quickly, efficiently. Then she stirred the pot with a spoon, wiped the grater on her apron, and hid the root back in her pocket. She turned to the camera, or rather, toward the jar of pasta where the camera was hidden, and smiled. It was not a smile for an audience. It was a private smile of satisfaction. My blood ran cold. It was not an allergy. It was not bad luck. It was chemistry. She was dosing me. She was methodically, deliberately introducing a toxin into my system, night after night, wrapping it in the guise of maternal care. Soyujinghal Ling. Tuo. Gemma. I jumped, nearly dropping the phone. Kenji was standing at the bedroom door. He had unlocked it from the outside with a coin. The simple privacy lock was no match for him. He held a tray. On the tray was a bowl of rice porridge and the blue teapot. "You have not eaten all day," he said gently. His eyes were soft, filled with that hangdog concern that used to make me melt. "Mama made you some okayu. It is plain, no spices. And your tea." I looked at the teapot. Steam curled from the spout, innocent and inviting. "Get it away from me," I whispered, scrambling backward against the headboard. "Gemma, please." Kenji said, walking into the room. He set the tray on the nightstand. "You are being irrational. Hiro is asking about you. He thinks you hate him. Mama is downstairs crying because you will not join the family dinner. Can you just drink the tea, eat a little, and come down? Just for 10 minutes? She put something in it," I said, pointing at the pot. "I saw her. I have a camera." "Kenji." She grated a root into that tea. Kenji stared at me. Then, slowly, his face twisted into an expression of pity. "A camera?" he asked softly. "You are spying on my mother? She is poisoning me," I screamed. "Look at the phone. Look at the footage." I thrust the phone toward him. He did not look at it. He pushed my hand away gently. "You are having a breakdown, Gemma," he said. "This is paranoia. Deep, clinical paranoia. Mama is using traditional herbs. Ginseng, ginger, things to help your circulation. She is trying to heal you. And you are accusing her of Soyujinghaling. 2# is greater than what? Murder? It is not ginseng," I yelled. "Ginseng does not give you hives. Ginseng does not make you blind with migraines." "Drink the tea," Kenji said, his voice hardening. "Show me you trust me. Show me you are still my wife. If you drink it, I will believe you are trying. If you do not, Soyujinghaling, 2# is greater than." He trailed off, leaving the threat hanging in the air. I looked at him. I looked at the man I had vowed to spend my life with. He was not evil. He was worse. He was weak. He was so desperate to be the good son that he was willing to sacrifice his wife on the altar of his mother's ego. "I will come down," I said, a sudden, reckless plan forming in my mind. "But I will not drink that." "Fine," Kenji said, looking relieved. "Just come down. Show your face." I stood up. My legs were shaky, but adrenaline was pumping through my veins, temporarily masking the fatigue. I put on my robe. I grabbed my phone. I walked downstairs. The staircase felt like a gallows walk. The living room was thick with smoke. Hiro was smoking a cigarette indoors, tapping the ash onto my carpet. Mrs. Tanaka sat in my armchair, sipping tea. When she saw me, her eyes lit up with mock concern. "The princess descends." Hiro laughed, blowing a smoke ring. "You look like hell, Gemma." "Gemma?" Mrs. Tanaka cooed. "Come, sit. Did you drink your tea? It will calm your spirit. I know what you are doing," I said. My voice was low, shaking, but clear. I stood in the center of the room, gripping my phone like a weapon. "We are loving you," Mrs. Tanaka said, her smile not wavering. "We are taking care of you." "I saw you," I said to her. "I have a camera in the kitchen. I saw the root. I saw the powder." The room went silent. Hiro stopped laughing. Mrs. Tanaka went very still. Kenji stood behind me, wringing his hands. Gemma, stop, Kenji whispered. No, I said. I know you are poisoning me. I do not know what it is. Monkshood? Oleander? But I know you are doing it, and I am going to the police. Mrs. Tanaka placed her teacup on the saucer with a sharp clink. She stood up. She did not look frightened. She looked bored. Who will believe you? She asked softly. You are the woman who hides money from her husband. You are the woman who kicks a mother out in the rain. You are hysterical. You are sick. The doctors say it is stress. Everyone knows you are unstable. I have the video, I said, holding up the phone. Give me the phone. Gemma, Hiro said, standing up. He was big, much bigger than Kenji. He stepped toward me. Stay back, I warned, backing toward the front door. But before I could take another step, a wave of agony ripped through my stomach. It was not a cramp. It felt like someone had shoved a serrated knife into my gut and twisted it. I gasped, dropping the phone. My knees buckled. I hit the floor hard, my hands clutching my abdomen. The pain was blinding. White spots danced in my vision. My throat constricted. I tried to breathe, but the air would not go down. Gemma, Kenji cried out. He rushed to me, kneeling beside me. What is wrong? Breathe. Call Saoiting Haoling. 2# is greater than 911. I wheezed, grabbing his shirt. Help. Saoiting Haoling. 2. Me. Kenji looked up at his mother. Mama? Call an ambulance. She is hurting. Mrs. Tanaka did not move. She stood over me, looking down like a scientist observing a specimen in a jar. She is having a panic attack. Mrs. Tanaka said calmly, it is guilt. The guilt is eating her alive. Do not call the police. Kenji, they will put her in a mental hospital. Do you want that for your wife? She is in pain, Kenji shouted, tears streaming down his face. Look at her. Give her the holy water. Mrs. Tanaka said, gesturing to a bottle on the table. She needs to cleanse her soul. Please. I choked out. My vision was tunneling. The edges of the room were turning black. Kenji, Saoiting Haoling. 2# is greater than please. Hiro laughed. She is acting. Bro, look at her. Drama queen. I realized then, with a clarity that cut through the pain, that I was going to die on my own floor. They were going to watch me die. Mrs. Tanaka would claim it was a heart attack or a stroke. Kenji would cry at my funeral. Hiro would live in my house. The rage that surged through me was hotter than the poison. I rolled onto my side. My phone was 2 feet away. Do not let her touch the phone. Mrs. Tanaka commanded sharply. Hiro lunged for it, but I was faster. Or perhaps desperation made me faster. I grabbed the phone and double-clicked the side button. The emergency shortcut I had set up years ago. A loud siren noise emitted from the phone, piercing the room. What is that? Hiro yelled, covering his ears. 911. What is your emergency? The operator's voice was tinny but loud on speakerphone. Help. I screamed into the device, using every ounce of air left in my lungs. Poisoned. My husband's mother. Saoiting Hao Lin. 2# is greater than poisoned me. Address is Saoiting Hao Ling. R. Jinghao Daoyu. Hiro kicked the phone out of my hand. It skid across the floor, crashing into the wall. You bitch, Hiro shouted. They heard me. I whispered, staring up at the ceiling. The pain was consuming me now, pulling me down into a dark, cold water. They, Saoyuting Haoling, 2 hash is greater than heard. Saoyuting Haoling, 2 hash is greater than the address. Kenji was sobbing, holding my hand. Gemma, stay with me. Why did you do that? Why? Because, I gasped, looking into his weak, watery eyes. You, Saoyuting Haoling, 2 hash is greater than would not. The last thing I saw before the darkness took me was Mrs. Tanaka's face. She was not looking at me. She was looking at the front door, waiting for the sirens. She looked annoyed, like someone who had been interrupted in the middle of a tedious chore. Then, the world went black. I woke up to the rhythmic beeping of machines. It was a familiar sound, the same sound that had surrounded Mrs. Tanaka weeks ago, but this time, the rhythm was faster. I opened my eyes. White light, sterile ceiling. She is awake. A voice said. A doctor leaned over me. He was young, with kind eyes behind thick glasses. A police officer stood in the corner of the room, arms crossed. Where, Saoyuting Haoling, 2 hash is greater than I tried to speak. But my throat was raw, as if I had swallowed broken glass. You are at St. Mary's Hospital. The doctor said, you are safe, Mrs. Patel. You have been here for 2 days. Saoyuting Haoling, 2 hash is greater than 2 days? My husband? I rasped. He is in the waiting room, the officer said, stepping forward. We have not let him in yet. We needed to speak to you first. The doctor looked at his clipboard. Gemma, we found high concentrations of aconite in your system. It is a toxin derived from the monkshood plant. It causes heart arrhythmia, gastrointestinal distress, and paralysis. In high enough doses, it is fatal. You had enough in your blood to stop a horse's heart, but it seems to have been administered in small doses over a long period, which built up a tolerance, but also caused the cumulative organ damage. Aconite, monkshood, the root. The police have searched your home. The officer continued. They found a bag of dried roots in the guest room trash can, and they found the camera footage on your phone. I closed my eyes. Tears leaked out, hot and stinging. I was alive. I was vindicated. Is she arrested? I asked. The officer hesitated. We brought Mrs. Tanaka in for questioning. She claims it was a traditional herbal remedy. She claims she did not know it was toxic. She claims she was trying to help your fertility. Fertility? I laughed. A dry, painful hacking sound. She is playing the ignorant grandmother card, the officer said grimly, and without a confession of intent to harm. It is tricky, but with the video and the toxicology report, we have enough for a restraining order and likely an assault charge. But Saoyuting Haoling, Arting Haodayu. But what? I asked. Your husband is corroborating her story, the officer said gently. He says his mother is senile, that she makes mistakes. He is asking us not to press charges. Of course he was. Even now, after watching me writhe on the floor, Kenji was protecting the hand that held the knife. I looked at the ceiling. The pain in my stomach was a dull throb now, but the pain in my chest, the heartbreak of total betrayal, was sharp and fresh. Officer, I said, my voice gaining strength. I want to press charges. I want to press every charge you have. Attempted murder, assault, poisoning. And your husband? The officer asked. He is an accomplice, I said. The words tasted like bile. Keep him out of this room. I do not want to see him. I do not want to see any of them. Understood, the officer said. I lay back on the pillow, I was alone in a hospital bed. My body was broken. My marriage was a crime scene. But as I listened to the steady beep of the monitor, I realized something. I was still the owner of the house. And now, I was going to evict them all. The hospital room was quiet, save for the hum of the air conditioning and the turning of pages. Sitting in the visitor's chair was not my husband, but a man named Mr. Vance. He was a private investigator I had hired 3 days ago, using the last ounce of battery on my phone before the ambulance arrived. He wore a rumpled gray suit that smelled of stale tobacco, but his eyes were sharp, intelligent, and devoid of pity. He tossed a manila folder onto my lap. "It is worse than you thought, Mrs. Patel," he said, his voice gravelly. "You are not just dealing with a bad mother-in-law. You are dealing with a professional grifter." I opened the folder. The first photo was of Hero, looking sweaty and terrified, arguing with 2 large men outside a casino in Reno. "Your brother-in-law owes $150,000 to loan sharks," Vance explained. They gave him a deadline, 30 days. That was 28 days ago. If he does not pay up by this weekend, he is not just going to lose his kneecaps. He is going to disappear. I stared at the number. 150,000. It was almost exactly the amount of equity I had in my liquid savings. The money Mrs. Tanaka had seen in my files. "Keep reading," Vance said. "The next page." I turned the page. It was a newspaper clipping from 5 years ago. A small town in Oregon. The headline read, "House fire claimed suspected arson. Family dog perishes. That is Hero's first wife, Sarah," Vance said, pointing to a blurry photo of a sobbing woman. "She had a mental breakdown. She claimed her mother-in-law was poisoning her dog and moving things around the house. Everyone thought she was crazy. She was institutionalized for 3 months. While she was locked up, the house burned down. Wiring fault. They said Mrs. Tanaka and Hero collected the insurance money, $200,000. They blew it all in Vegas in 6 months. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the hospital air. I was not a person to them. I was a piggy bank. I was an insurance policy. They had done this before. They had perfected the script. "So, they are going to kill me?" I asked, my voice steady. "They do not want to kill you," Vance corrected. "Dead bodies bring autopsies. Autopsies bring questions. They want you incapacitated. They want you declared mentally incompetent or so sick that you sign over power of attorney. Or they want you to just sign the deed and leave, so they can sell the house immediately to pay off the sharks." I closed the folder. The fear that had gripped me for weeks evaporated. In its place was a cold, hard resolve. I was a data analyst. I looked for patterns, and now that I saw the pattern, I knew exactly how to break it. "I am not pressing charges yet," I said. Vance raised an eyebrow. "You have enough for assault." "It is not enough," I said. "If I arrest them now, Kenji will bail them out. They will say it was an accident. They will claim ignorance. I need them to admit it. I need them to say the words. I need a wire." I told him. The discharge process was a blur. I signed the papers, refused the wheelchair, and called a rideshare. I did not call Kenji. When the car pulled into 1242 Oak Creek Drive, I saw the true extent of the damage to my reputation. As I stepped out onto the driveway, I saw Betty Miller across the street. She was watering her roses. When she saw me, she did not wave. She turned her back, pulling her cardigan tighter around herself. I could practically hear the rumors buzzing in the air like flies. "Did you hear about Gemma?" Overdosed. Pills. Poor Kenji. Poor Mrs. Tanaka. Having to deal with a junkie daughter-in-law. Mrs. Tanaka had been busy. She had not just poisoned my body, she had poisoned my world. I walked to the front door. My key felt heavy in my hand. I took a deep breath, let my shoulders slump, and forced tears into my eyes. I needed to look broken. I needed to look beaten. I unlocked the door. The house smelled of lemon pledge and lavender. The earthy stink of the poison root was gone. They had scrubbed the scene. Kenji was sitting on the sofa, his head in his hands. Mrs. Tanaka was knitting in my armchair. Hiro was eating a sandwich with his feet on the coffee table. When I entered, the room froze. Gemma, Kenji stood up. He looked terrible, dark circles under his eyes. His shirt wrinkled. He took a step toward me, then stopped. "You are back?" "I am back," I whispered, letting my voice crack. Mrs. Tanaka put down her knitting needles. She studied me with the eyes of a hawk, spotting a field mouse. "We were worried," she said. Her voice was smooth, like oil. "The doctors said you had an Saoyuting Haolin 2 episode." "I know," I said, looking at the floor. "I am so sorry. I do not know what happened. I think the stress, Saoyuting Haoling 2 is greater than it finally broke me. I have been so paranoid, so angry." Kenji exhaled, a long, shuddering sound of relief. "Say, Mama, I told you, she is just stressed." She did not mean those things she said about the poison. Mrs. Tanaka stood up and walked over to me. She reached out and touched my cheek. Her hand was warm, but I felt the phantom chill of the grater she had used. "We forgive you, Gemma," she said benevolently. "Family forgives, but we cannot go on like this. You are unwell. You cannot handle the burden of this household alone." I nodded, letting a tear slip down my cheek. "You are right. I cannot do it. I am weak." Hiro snorted from the couch. "Finally, she admits it." I looked at Kenji. "I want to fix this. Kenji, I want to save our marriage." "Then sign the papers," Mrs. Tanaka said. She did not waste a second. She walked to the mantel and picked up the quitclaim deed. It was already smoothed out, waiting. "Add Kenji to the title. Let him lead. Let him take the burden off your shoulders. Once you sign, we can sell this big, cold house. We can move somewhere smaller, somewhere. Saoyuting Haoling 2 is greater than cheaper. And we can use the extra money to help Hiro get back on his feet." There it was, the end game. I looked at the document. "Okay," I said softly. Kenji looked at me, his eyes widening. "Really? You will sign?" "Yes," I said, "but not today. I am too tired. Tomorrow. Let us have a notary come tomorrow evening. We will do it properly. A fresh start." Mrs. Tanaka smiled. It was the smile of a predator who feels the trap snap shut. "Tomorrow," she agreed. She patted my cheek again. "You are finally learning, Gemma. Obedience is a virtue." I walked past them, up the stairs to the guest room. I told them I could not sleep in the master bedroom because of the bad memories. As I closed the door, I heard Hiro laugh downstairs. "We got her," he said. I sat on the edge of the bed and pulled the small, black recording device from my bra. I checked the battery. It was full. "Enjoy your victory tonight," I whispered to the floorboards, "because tomorrow you are going to pay for every single hive's welt, every single lie, and every single dollar you thought you could steal." I lay down, But I did not sleep. I stared at the ceiling, rehearsing my lines for the final act. I was no longer the victim. I was the director. And tomorrow, the curtain would fall on the Tanaka family show forever. The notary arrived at 6 o'clock in the evening. She was a stern woman named Mrs. Higgins with gray hair pulled back in a tight bun, carrying a leather briefcase that looked heavy enough to bludgeon someone. She sat at the dining room table, arranging her stamp and logbook with bureaucratic precision. The atmosphere in the house was electric. It was the kind of tension that precedes a thunderstorms or an execution. Mrs. Tanaka was dressed in her best silk blouse, her hair perfectly coiffed. She poured tea for everyone, store-bought tea bags this time. I noted she was taking no chances today. Hiro was pacing near the window, checking his watch every 30 seconds. His loan shark deadline must have been hours away. Kenji sat next to me. He kept trying to hold my hand, his palm sweaty and clammy. "Are you ready, Gemma?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. "This is a new beginning for us." I looked at him, really looked at him. I saw the weakness in his jawline, the desperate need for approval in his eyes. He was not malicious, perhaps, but his passivity was a weapon his mother wielded with expert precision. He was the gun. She was the trigger finger. "I am ready," I said softly. Mrs. Higgins cleared her throat. "We are here to sign a quitclaim deed, transferring 50% interest in the property located at 1242 Oak Creek Drive from Gemma Patel to Kenji Tanaka. Is that correct?" "Yes," Mrs. Tanaka answered for me. "I need to hear it from the grantor," Mrs. Higgins said, peering over her spectacles at me. "Yes," I said, "that is correct." Mrs. Higgins pushed the document toward me. "Sign here, please." I picked up the pen. The room went silent. I could hear Hiro's heavy breathing from the corner. I could feel Mrs. Tanaka's gaze burning into the side of my head. I hovered the pen over the paper. Then I stopped. "Wait," I said. "What is it?" Hiro snapped, stepping forward. "Just sign it. I just have one question," I said, turning to look directly at Mrs. Tanaka. My voice was calm, conversational. "If I sign this, Saoyutsing Hao Ling, 2 hash is greater than, will you stop making me sick?" Mrs. Tanaka froze. Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "Gemma, what are you talking about? You are hysterical again." "No," I said, putting the pen down. "I need to know. The root you grated into my tea, the aconite, was the plan to kill me, or just make me weak enough to sign this?" "Gemma," Kenji gasped, "not this again. Please, do not embarrass us in front of the notary. Answer me," I said to Mrs. Tanaka, ignoring him. "I am about to give you $500,000 in equity. I think I deserve the truth. Was it just for the money? To pay Hiro's gambling debts?" "Shut up," Hiro yelled. "Who told you about the debts?" "It does not matter," Mrs. Tanaka said sharply. Cutting him off, she looked at me, her eyes cold and hard. She realized the game had changed. She leaned in, lowering her voice, assuming the notary was just a harmless witness. "You want the truth? Fine. You are not worthy of this house. You are not worthy of my son. We did what we had to do to reclaim what belongs to the family. You were just an obstacle, Gemma, a stubborn, greedy obstacle. So you admit it?" I asked. "You poisoned me to get the house?" "I cleansed the house," she hissed. "And once you sign that paper, We will sell it, and you can take your half and rot in a studio apartment. You will not be here to get sick anymore. Thank you, I said. I picked up the pen again, but instead of signing, I reached into my blazer pocket. I pulled out my phone. It was recording. Did you get that? I asked the phone. Then I looked at Mrs. Higgins. Did you get that, Officer Higgins? The stern notary smiled. It was a grim, satisfied smile. She reached under the table and pulled out not a stamp, but a police badge, loud and clear. Mrs. Patel, she said. The room exploded into chaos. What? Hero screamed. He bolted for the back door. Sit down, a voice boomed from the kitchen. Mr. Vance, my private investigator, stepped out, holding a taser. 2 uniformed officers burst through the front door, guns drawn. Police, nobody move. Mrs. Tanaka stood up, knocking her chair over. Her face went from smug victory to pale terror in a heartbeat. Kenji, she shrieked, do something. They are attacking your mother. Kenji sat frozen in his chair. He looked at me, then at the police, then at his mother. His mouth opened and closed like a fish on dry land. You, Sao Jing Haoling, 2# is greater than you admitted it. Kenji whispered, you said you cleansed the house. I was protecting you, Mrs. Tanaka screamed as an officer grabbed her wrists. She struggled, kicking and spitting. She is a witch. She stole your manhood. I did it for you. You poisoned her, Kenji said, his voice breaking. Tears streamed down his face. You made me feed her the poison. Get your hands off me, Hiro yelled as he was tackled near the patio door. I did not do anything. It was all her idea. Hiro, Mrs. Tanaka wailed. Do not betray your mother. I sat perfectly still at the table. I watched as the handcuffs clicked around Mrs. Tanaka's thin wrists. I watched as Hiro was dragged out, cursing and crying about his knees. The room was suddenly empty of the noise, save for Kenji's sobbing. Officer Higgins, Detective Higgins, actually walked over to me. We have the recording, she said, plus the confession in front of a law enforcement officer. That is attempted murder, conspiracy, and extortion. They are not getting bail. Thank you, I said. I stood up and walked over to Kenji. He was still sitting at the table, his head buried in his arms. Kenji, I said. He looked up. His eyes were red, swollen, pathetic. Gemma, he choked out. I did not know. I swear to God, I did not know. Please, I am a victim too. She manipulated me. I looked down at him. I felt a pang of sadness, but it was distant, like looking at an old photograph of someone who had died years ago. You are not a victim, Kenji, I said softly. You are a grown man. You watched your mother abuse me for weeks. You watched me get sick. And when I begged for help, you told me to drink the tea. I can change. He begged, reaching for my hand. I will go to therapy. I will testify against her. Please, Gemma, do not kick me out. I pulled my hand away. The locks are being changed tomorrow morning. I said, you can pack a bag now. The officers will escort you out. Sao Jing Haoling, Tvo, Gemma, Sao Jing Haoling, Jing Hao, Dayu. Get out of my house, I said. The words felt familiar. They were the same words Mrs. Tanaka had screamed at me weeks ago, but this time, they carried the weight of the law, the deed, and the truth. Kenji stood up. He looked at the empty chair where his mother had sat. He looked at the shattered remains of his family. Then he walked out the door into the night, following the flashing red and blue lights of the police cars. I was alone. The silence in the house was absolute. It was not the heavy, suffocating silence of secrets that had plagued the hallways for the last month, nor was it the terrified silence of a victim waiting for the next blow. This was a clean, expansive silence. It was the sound of a space that had been reclaimed, scrubbed, and purified, not with herbs, but with justice. I sat on the floor of the living room. The furniture was gone. I had hired a crew the day after the arrests. They took the sofa Kenji had slept on. They took the armchair Mrs. Tanaka had ruled from. They took the dining table where the notary had sat. I wanted it all gone. I wanted every fiber, every cushion, every atom that had absorbed their toxicity to be incinerated. I was eating pizza from a cardboard box, pepperoni and jalapeno. It was greasy, spicy, and utterly devoid of nutritional value. It was the best meal I had ever tasted. My phone buzzed on the floor beside me. It was a text from my lawyer. Update on the arraignment. Bail denied for Mrs. Tanaka. Flight risk and danger to the community. Hero's bail set at $50,000. But nobody is posting it. The loan sharks know where he is now, safely in county jail. Ironically, prison might be the only thing keeping him alive. I did not smile. It was not funny. It was just Saoyud Sing Hao Ling. 2 hash is greater than finished. Another buzz. Kenji's lawyer called again. He is asking for a mediation session. He wants to discuss reconciliation terms. I typed back a single word. No. I put the phone down. I thought about Kenji. I thought about the man who had cooked me dinner on our second date. The man who had held my hair back when I had the flu last year. I wondered if that man had ever really existed, or if he was just a reflection of what I wanted to see. Perhaps he was always just clay, waiting for strong hands to mold him. When my hands were on him, he was a good husband. When his mother's hands were on him, he was a weapon. He was not evil, but in the end, his weakness was more dangerous than malice. Malice you can see coming. Weakness opens the door and invites the malice in for tea. I took a bite of pizza. The jalapeno burned my tongue. A sharp, clean heat. My health was returning. The hives were gone. The brain fog had lifted, leaving behind a crystalline clarity. My liver enzymes were still elevated, and the doctor said I would need to be careful with my diet for a few months, but I would recover. The scars on my heart would take longer, but they would heal too, tissue by tissue. I looked around the empty room. The moonlight streamed in through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the hardwood floors. Some people would sell the house. They would say it was tainted. They would say the memories were too painful. But I was not some people. I was Gemma Patel. I had worked 80-hour weeks for this view. I had saved every penny while my friends went on vacations. I had built this fortress to protect myself from the chaos of the world, from the poverty of my childhood, from the unpredictability of life. And it had worked. The fortress had held. The invaders had breached the gates. Yes, they had poisoned the well, but the walls were still standing. The deed was still in the drawer. The name on the title was still mine. I stood up and walked to the window. Across the street, I saw Betty Miller's curtains twitch. She was watching. Let her watch. Let the whole homeowners association watch. Let them whisper about the police cars and the handcuffs. Let them gossip about the divorce. I raised my slice of pizza in a silent toast to the invisible audience. I was alone. I was divorced. I was recovering from attempted murder. But as I looked out at the quiet, manicured street, I realized I had never felt more powerful. I took a deep breath. The air smelled of rain and freedom. "Get out," I whispered to the memory of them. And finally, truly, they were gone.